Gentlemen, this week, the name on the marquee has got to be Tom Aspinall, who this past weekend at UFC Fight Night, Aspinall versus Tybura, in the main event, UFC London at the O2 Arena, defeated Marcin Tybura by TKO via elbow and punches, the official time 1:13 of the very first round. Mark, start us off here. Your boy's back in the winning column. Aspinall gets it done. Give us your thoughts and your take of his performance.
Yes. Yes, he is. This man might turn out to be one of my greatest early talent pegs that I have had. I thought he could be special very early, and he is special. And it seems like more and more people are starting to realize that, just how good this man is. He friggin' smoked Marcin Tybura after a year on the sidelines. It wasn't even 2 minutes, and yet he managed to show a beautiful high kick, a monster body kick, tremendous speed, lightning quick hands, and never got hit once. He is a special fighter, man. There's nothing he can't do, and I really don't believe there's a ceiling. And we're going to see for sure, because he's throwing names out there now. He's mentioning John Jones in a post-fight interview. Jones is acknowledging him. This is just what I was hoping would happen. His buzz got killed. He lost some time because of that Curtis Blades injury. And, at times he has said, I don't want to rush. I want to take my time, get better. I'm very happy to see him get back in the mix and immediately insert himself into the picture, because it is where his talent dictates he should be. He is this good.
Omar, bringing you in here, Tom Aspinall snaps Marcin Tybura's 2-fight win streak, putting him back in the loss column. A bit of a step up for Tybura after fighting Alexander Romanov and Blagoy Ivanov back-to-back. He goes up to Tom Aspinall as a bit of a heat check, and checked he got. Give us your take on the techniques that Tom Aspinall threw out there that ultimately did away with Marcin Tybura and send him back to the lower rankings.
I mean, it's hard to deny the athleticism of Tom Aspinall. He's somebody that moves very, very gingerly for somebody who weighs like 260 pounds. You're not going to really see a lot of guys like that. I would even argue he moves a lot better than Cyril Gane does. I think he moves with a lot more purpose in mind, both in the striking, but also kind of in the grappling exchanges as well. And I would also argue it's not even really a karate style. It's almost really like a blitz style. So unlike guys like Wonder Boy, or even guys like Robert
MVP?
Whitaker, who like to use a lot of their front kicks and things like that MVP as well. MVP's a little bit more showy though, so he does a lot more than the typical range finder when it comes to that kind of movement. But Tom Aspinall is I think even more dynamic when it comes to that kind of stuff, and probably closer to MVP in the sense that he uses a lot of that movement and a lot of that back and forth movement to sort of distract and change up the timing, and then he will blitz on different counts. And that punch, you could see Tybura wasn't really reacting to it, or didn't react to it as quickly because it was on an offbeat, and I think it really threw him off. But it landed, and it sat Tybura right down, and you gotta love the finishing instincts from Tom Aspinall. It's very hard to deny how good this kid is. It's very hard not to want to see him fight the cream of the crop at this point, and it's very hard not to think that a fight with John Jones, I'm not going to go full Bisbing and say John Jones can't hold a candle to him. That shit is crazy. Those exact words are wild. I think it would be competitive. I think it'll be fun. I think Tom Aspinall will make a good showing of himself. I don't necessarily know if he wins or not, but I don't think he gets run over like I think a lot of the other heavyweights probably would against John Jones. I'm very intrigued by the whole thing.
Man, I mean, he gets right back in the win column in emphatic fashion after an 8-fight win streak snapped by a snapped knee against Curtis Blades in the first 15 seconds of that fight after eating one leg kick from Curtis Blades. A bit of a freak thing. Would have absolutely loved to see how that fight played out. Would love to see them maybe run it back one day. But Man, he won his first, I think it was 5 fights in the UFC, all by finish. I believe Tom Aspinall has yet to win a fight by decision, and almost all of his fights have been finished in the first round, and not many of them have gone past more than, 2 or 3 minutes. So, yeah, that being said, Mark.
He doesn't need much, man.
Yeah. Mark, getting right back in the win column, what do you think should be next? If you were the matchmaker of the UFC, Aspinall's throwing out some big names out there, what would you do?
So I know he mentioned showing up in Paris to watch Cyril Gane versus Sergey Spivak and potentially fighting the winner of that fight, and maybe that's where this does go. Granted, he already smoked Sergey Spivak. I don't know if people are forgetting that, so it really only makes sense if the winner's Cyril Gane. But, man, it sure feels a lot more like it should be Aspinall and Pavlovich, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Unless, of course, they've already told Pavlovich that he is fighting the Bone Stipe winner. But with the activity rate of those two guys, he may end up waiting another year for that. So he might be better off taking another fight anyway. But that's the fight, man. You know, in an ideal world where John Jones fought more, what I had in my brain was first he tries to defend against Miocic. If he does that, he tries to defend against Pavlovich, and then by that point, Aspinall is there. And in my head, I was like, if he can run through that, it will be like one of the most incredible runs. But it just doesn't seem like the activity of Bones at this point, the mentions of retirement now, it doesn't seem like it's going to line up that way. So with him already mentioning the retirement idea, I almost think you got to set up Pavlovich and Aspinall and hope that one guy wins and hopefully does it really impressively, calls him out, and maybe entices him to do one more. And I don't mean to dismiss Stipe here. Of course, he could beat Jones and throw this whole thing, upside down. But I'm trying to get to Bones and Aspinall because I've been wanting that to happen for a long time.
Yeah, that would be crazy. Also, I think Omar alluded to it. Aspinall and Gane would be an absolutely fascinating matchup. Those two guys, two heavyweights that move like middleweights, would be incredible. Omar, what about you? Any other bright ideas for what you would do next?
Sorry. Not really. Mark kind of laid out the foundation of it really quick, just especially because of how kind of congested the heavyweight division is, right? We kind of have the fights that we want to see. Jones and Miocic are kind of taking their sweet-ass time at this point. Things were supposed to happen in July, then it got pushed back, and now it's MSG, but, like, who really knows? I keep telling you, I don't believe John Jones gets in the octagon until he's, like, walking down the path. But again, the Cyril Gane one is the one that I think makes sense for his title run. But Sergey Pavlovich, I think, is the one that makes the most amount of sense as far as trying to figure out who the number one contender is. Because I don't even think Cyril Gane winning, he's not getting a rematch with John Jones right now. So it just, it makes more sense to me to figure out who's fighting John Jones next. One of the two guys that makes sense for John Jones to fight in the first place. And that's Pavlovich and Tom Aspinall.
Mark, what were you going to say before?
I was just going to say, as intriguing as Aspinall Gane is, and I agree, simply because of how intriguing it would be on the feet, you'd have to hope Cyril Gane has shored up the grappling. Because if you're Tom Aspinall, you're going into that fight, and you're like, well, I'm not fucking around with this guy. I'm going to take him down as soon as I can. Mm-hmm. And, obviously John Jones is potentially a different beast, but we saw how Gane looked, and Tom Aspinall seems to be nearly as dangerous on the ground. So he's, at least in his mind, he would certainly have an advantage going into that fight.
Yeah.
I think right now the guys that are the biggest issue at heavyweight are Sergey Spivak, Tom Aspinall, and Jailton Almeida. Those three dudes right now.
You meant, right?
What did I say?
You said Spivak.
Oh, yes, Pavlovich.
Yeah, agree.
And Jailton Almeida. I think those three guys right now, if I really think about who could give John Jones at the very minimum a run for his money, I think those three guys are the ones that make it the most interesting.
Totally agree. I think those are the three most intriguing heavyweights who have yet to have a title shot.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you guys want to say about Tom Aspinall? You guys want to match up Marcin Tybura real quick?
Yeah, I guess I'll say Jairzinho Rosenstrike for Marcin. It's not the sexiest fight ever, but he's kind of beaten the next tier down. He shouldn't really get the next tier up, and it kind of feels like Rosenstrike is the other guy who's like fitting that bill where he is, and they have not fought, so might as well run those two.
Any other ideas, Omar?
Yep. Nope. I had the same pick, and had Romanoff and him not recently fought like a year ago. I probably would have threw him in the mix as well, but that is the case. So Rosenstreich it is.
Let's do it. All right, boys. Let's move on now to the co-main event of this UFC Fight Night, in which Julija Stoliarenko defeats Molly McCann by submission via armbar. The official time 1:55. I'm sorry, not Julia. The official time 1:55 of round number 1. Not a great look for Molly Meatball. Omar, give us your take of what happened.
I mean, Molly actually looked pretty decent on the feet. I actually really kind of enjoy watching her strike. She's pretty tight on the feet. But she's a small girl. And I think she really had issues with the range and trying to get inside and actually being able to land a lot of those shots. And Stoliarenko was playing the game that she plays. And that armbar shit is not new to her. She's had a lot of misfortune here in the UFC, but her armbar is the one thing that you can kind of count on her if she is going to win. And I think it was rough for Molly McCann to not be prepared for that. And she ended up in a weird position against the cage, but it just kind of seemed like she jumped right into the armbar and made it even worse for herself than it, had, I guess, she done something else in that moment. I feel for Molly McCann. I think she's fun, especially on those London cards. It's hard to deny the energy that she brings to those London cards and how the fans react to her. But I mean, the performances have got to get better than what they are right now, because it's not great. Co-main event for that kind of performance seems rough, very rough.
Mark, what about you? Molly McCann now 2 losses back-to-back by submission both times. What's your take of what went down on Saturday?
I mean, Omar touched on it, but for someone who should have been drilling armbar defense all camp, since it was pretty much, to put it bluntly, the only way she could lose to Julija Stoliarenko, her armbar defense did not look good. It looked kind of panicked and rushed and not like something that she had been prepared for. So that's a little bit baffling. But with that said, I know we picked Molly, which was more because we didn't trust Stoliarenko and her 1-5 UFC record. But if you're a fan of Molly, you can't say we haven't warned you on here. Yes, she's easy to root for, and yes, she's had some unreal KOs, but she has never been near being an elite level flyweight, and her ground game has always been suspect, and it was again here. As soon as this thing hit the mat, it went south, and she had Stoliarenko fighting her for a bit. They were swinging early. She had her shot to land something there, but Stoliarenko did well enough to get it where she needed it, and gets another armbar. As Omar said, it seems like it's either an armbar or a loss for Stoliarenko,
Right.
And this time it was armbar.
It's like you flip a coin, armbar or take an L.
Yep.
I mean, a little bit.
All right. Now that she is 2-5 in the UFC, that win by submission once again, possibly prolonging her UFC stay so far. We'll see. Let's talk about Julija Stoliarenko for now, since she is in the winner's circle. Omar, what do you think? She is a big girl for bantamweight. She has fought at featherweight as well. What do you think's next for her?
Well, so she's talked about going down to 115.
No, he's asking about Stoliarenko did.
Oh, my bad.
And this was flyweight. Remember, Mike. This was Stoliarenko's first fight down at flyweight. She just dropped down.
That's right. Yep.
So the person I had in mind for Stoliarenko was Ariane Lipski. The area where she's kind of at right now in her rankings, things are a little like scheduled for the most part already with matchups that I think would make a lot maybe even a little bit more intriguing and make a little bit more sense. But Ariane Lipski is right among that pack as well. She doesn't have anything scheduled, and I think it would be a good fight at the end of the day.
Yeah. Mark, what about
Yeah,
you?
similar vibes for me. I'll say Antonina Shevchenko. As I mentioned, Stoliarenko is new to this weight class. Yes, her record is not great, but first fight down here, got a good win. Fair play to put her in there against, another fairly established fighter and see what she can do.
Yeah, man. All right, let's move on. In the
Wait,
featherweight
can we talk
division.
Molly for a sec?
Oh, yeah, sure, my bad. Go ahead.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
So, yeah, I think this weight cut is interesting for Molly. First off, I knew it was coming. As soon as she lost, I had that thought. It's 2 in a row. This one was in London, which hurts her.
Yeah.
She was the way smaller girl in this fight, so it's just very natural for her in her brain to go, what just went wrong, and kind of cling to that of, you know what, I must be at the wrong weight class. Like, I knew this was coming. And I get it. She's a smaller flyweight. Problem is, there are a shit ton of grapplers at 115, so I'm not sure it's going to be any better for her. It might be worse. But to start, I will do her a solid, and I'll throw her in there against a fellow striker in a fight that could be a potential banger, and I will say, how about Denise Gomes?
Okay. I like it. Omar, any other ideas for what could be next in store for Molly Meatball?
Indeed, I do. I need my girl to get on the right track. I need my girl to. You already know. The other side. I need my girl on track. I need her to fight somebody who's going to stand and bang with her. I need somebody who I think she has a good shot at winning against. So I'm going to give her. I'm going to give Molly McCann, Jasmine Haragui.
Oh, baby. That is a banger. I like it. I like it a lot. But you don't want Haragui to lose.
Hell no, I don't.
No, that's what he was saying. He's trying to set up Haragui. He thinks Haragui can beat Molly.
The aforementioned my girl was not Molly McCann.
Okay. I got to look
That shit was Yasmin
We're
Haragui.
talking about Molly McCann
Yes,
here.
I apologize. Well,
Okay.
your man's is ready to start talking about Jasmine Haragui. Let's go.
All right. In the featherweight division,
Isn't it
Nathaniel.
Yasmin? She can't be your girl if you're calling her Jasmine. It's Yasmin, no?
Jasmine, listen, got to placate a little bit to the masses.
Okay. All right. In the featherweight division, Nathaniel Wood gets it done over Andre Fili by unanimous decision, 29-28 on all three of the judges' scorecards. Mark, what was your take of the Brits taking the win here?
What a great fight this was. Both of these guys had the other badly hurt. Wood hurt Fili in round 1. Fili got him back in round 2. But even aside from that, there were some real clean shots that froze each guy throughout the fight. And they both looked good. The length was helping Fili for sure. He always carries some nice natural power. And then Wood was so fast. He was ripping the leg just how we expected him to. He was the faster boxer. He kept landing that check counter left hook on Fili when Fili stepped in. And he edged it out, man. It was 1-1 going into round 3, clear as day. And he landed more and harder in that round. And he gets another featherweight win here to move to 3-0 there now. He's a guy, who was fairly established at bantamweight, was kind of on the verge of breaking through those rankings when he decided to move up. Is small for this division and is making it not matter thus far. So he's now on the edge of these rankings. You would think the size has got to matter at some point here as he hits the elite, but it hasn't stopped him thus far, so we will see.
Omar?
Yeah, man, this was a great fight. The pace was insane. The pace for Andre Fili fights generally are, and I can definitely say that now for Nathaniel Wood as well. These guys were going at each other, man. It was a crazy ass scrap. I definitely had Wood winning rounds 1 and round 3. Had Fili obviously winning round 2. I thought it was a great fight, man. I'm really interested to see how far Nathaniel Wood can go. He's one of these guys that's really interesting in the featherweight division because he kind of reminds you of like the Bryce Mitchells of the divisions, right? The guys who were good at takedowns, but don't mind striking with somebody. And I think Nathaniel Wood's striking is pretty pretty scary. The dude throws a lot of heat when he's throwing. So I'm excited for him to see exactly what he's got left.
Okay. Mark, what do you think is next for Nathaniel Wood at featherweight?
I'll throw out two names here, and frankly, these two names could also fight each other, and it would work. But Dan Ige and Sadiq Yusuf. I feel like those are both names that Nathaniel Wood deserves at this point. He deserves to try to break through to these rankings, and I think either of those would be a really intriguing fight for him.
Okay. Any other thoughts for Wood?
So I had Wood actually going up against Bryce Mitchell. I'm not really sure what that dude's timeline is, but from a stylistic standpoint, I think that's a really good fight. And Bryce, I think at this point needs to really keep that divisional status, like the spot that he's at. He's got to defend it at this point. He's been out, I think, a little too long.
Okay. Do you guys have anything to say about Mr. Touchy Fili, or do you want to move on to the Scott?
I do have one.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure why I love this so much, but I really love it, and that is Andre Fili versus Julian Erosa. I want to see that fight.
That was mine too. Yeah,
wow, let's go.
That was mine too.
I don't know what it is. I'm like, as soon as that popped in my head, I was like, yes, now.
I think it's one of those fights that seems like it should have happened a long time ago, and I even went down their record, and I was like, they have never fought before, and it's super interesting. So yes, that is the fight to make.
Super coin tossy, like literally 50-50.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, boys. Let's move on to the great Scott. That is Paul Craig. Paul Craig made his middleweight debut, the former light heavyweight fighter for the UFC, who has wins over the likes of Nikita Krylov, Shogun Rua, although Rua's obviously at the end of his career, Kennedy Zichukwu, Magomed Ankalaev, and the current, well, now former champ, Jamal Hill. Drops down 20 pounds to 185 and looks incredible against Andre Muniz. Defeated him by TKO in the second round, the official time 4:40 of round 2. Omar, start us off. What are your thoughts, your initial thoughts of middleweight Paul Craig?
That dude looks great. He looked great at weigh-ins. He looked great during the fight. One could even argue he might have even been maybe even a tad bit smaller than Andre Muniz in there, which I think is very interesting. I mean, looking at him at light heavyweight, I didn't really think he had that much room to cut, but he definitely did because he didn't look drained at all during that fight. I can't really say enough good things about Paul Craig, man. I think that was really one of his best performances that he's ever had in the octagon, and that's saying a lot because he's fought and beaten a lot of great people. But that was one of the fights that I think he was winning almost the entirety of that fight. It wasn't some crazy comeback. It wasn't he got his ass beat for 3 rounds and he submitted the guy. I mean, he was putting it on Andre Muniz even on the feet. He used his length really well. And then once they got down to the ground, you know what I mean? Even in the first round, he was on bottom, but he was still working really well. And by the time we got to the second round, he was able to get on top and he was able to work. And it didn't even end up in a submission. He just got to a point where he was in a dominant position in mount and just rained holy hell down on Andre Muniz. I thought it was a great performance, man. I'm really excited to see if Paul Craig can do something at middleweight because if the performances stay like that, he's a real problem at 185.
Mark, after the Bear Jew dropped back-to-back fights against Ozdemir and Johnny Walker, he's back at the win column. Give us your thoughts on this performance and then where he might be able to go at 185 pounds and how far you think he could go here in this division.
Yeah, man, I was happy to see this. I thought he could take out Muniz. Me and you did pretty well in this card, by the way. Omar missed the week, of course, but you and I did well picks-wise. We looked smart. But how about it? Paul Craig coming down to middleweight and throwing them bows. Huge finish. And it was tricky for him for a little bit. You know, round one was good for Muniz. He's a bit better than Craig on the feet, as we mentioned. He probably would be last week. Bit more buttoned up. The left head kick landed nicely a couple times. Caps off the round with a takedown. Little bit of groundwork. It was a pretty good start for him. But then round 2, way more back and forth. Craig gets the early takedown. We got to see the grappling that we wanted to see between these two. There's the triangle that gets shot up right away from Andre Muniz that Craig has to escape. couple chokes for each guy, some nice transitions. I was glad we got to see the grappling on display as we did. But then out of nowhere, Paul Craig is suddenly in mount, and he is just raining shots down. And it went from a competitive fight to Andre Muniz trying to survive on a dime, and he could not. Like, it was just Paul Craig just flipped a switch, it seemed. And he looked really strong from top, where he landed what looked like some real dangerous elbows, and he just felt that finish coming and stepped on the gas hugely, and Muniz was done. So big-time middleweight debut for Paul Craig. There are going to be some fun fights ahead for this man.
Is it me, or do you feel like Andre Muniz, if there's any critique that I would give to him, it's that I feel like he carries a lot of muscle for 185 and that he doesn't have the best gas tank? Would you
I
agree?
think that's all
Disagree?
fair. Because I was not surprised to see how big he looked. We were saying it last week. He's a very big middleweight.
Yeah,
And he's one of those
fucking
guys that you
jacked.
wonder, like, if he just moved up, would his cardio be way better, and would he be able to take damage better? Like, should he not be at this division? So yeah, it's a fair point that you're making. It does make you wonder.
Yeah, he doesn't get like absolutely gassed, but he definitely, his cardio takes a noticeable dip in the middle of the fight. If he doesn't steamroll his opponent, I feel that Muniz, he carries a lot of muscle, and I think that's tiring. But I mean, I'm a fan of Muniz. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a super talented middleweight, and I've always liked his skill set. But if that's one critique I would say for him, it would be that. That being said, let's talk about the winner here, Paul Craig, at 185. This is delicious because I think that middleweight needs a little bit more of this infusion of new talent and new blood, and I love that Paul Craig has moved down. He's a fan favorite, especially in that part of the world, obviously. But I feel like Paul Craig has lots of fans all around because he just seems like an intense guy, and he's a purist's like fighter, if you know what I'm trying to say. That being said, Mark, put on your UFC matchmaker hat. What would you do next with Paul Craig at middleweight?
So they didn't rank Paul Craig.
I was going to ask you how you felt about that, because that shit to me seems wild.
Andre Muniz is ranked still.
Yep,
right now.
like 14th.
It's enough to drive me absolutely fucking insane. And they still have Paul Craig at lightweight, so I guess maybe that's at light heavyweight, so maybe that's why they didn't do it. But like, do it. Like, be on top of your shit. I just, as you guys know, I could go on these rants all day about the fucking UFC rankings and the joke that they are. But for what it's worth, he joins my middleweight rankings at number 7. This is a man who has wins over guys like Jamal Hill, Magomed Ankalaev. He just looked great against Muniz. Like, when I was debating, is he above like that Brunson, Dolidze, Hermanson group? I was like, yeah, he's done more in this sport than they have. So he's fairly high in my middleweight rankings. And I don't, if the UFC put him at 10 or 11, I'd be fine with it. But fucking get him in there. Anyway, I think he deserves to be treated like a fairly big deal here, entering the middleweight fray. As Mike said, I think he's great for this division. As I just said, he's a guy who has huge wins over guys like Jamal Hill. I won't jump him right into one of these top guys. I will say one more against like an established top 10 middleweight. And my mind went very quickly to Jack Hermanson. I just think he and Paul Craig make for a perfect matchup, and that Hermanson is a really good litmus test to show us exactly how much of a factor Paul Craig can be at this division. And if he passes that one with flying colors, then you go. But I think that's a great test.
Okay. Omar, any other ideas?
I don't hate it. I did throw Brendan Allen into mine. I think it's just a fun fight. I didn't realize you had him ranked nearly as high. I went off of what was on Ranking MMA, and they had
Where'd they have him? I didn't look at
15.
that.
They had him tied for 15 with Brendan Allen.
I don't get that.
Yeah, so he's below Chris Curtis and Imavov and Gastelum and Hermanson and stuff like that. Hermanson was my initial first choice, and then when I saw how low he was in the 15, I was like, maybe it's a little too high. Especially seeing that the UFC didn't have him ranked at all, which I thought was absolutely wild.
Yeah.
But Brendan Allen was the one I landed on.
I mean, it's again, and I thought about that fight also. It's fair to me if he doesn't get ranked that high, because I get it. Okay, the things are in another division. Maybe you don't want to go crazy with the rankings before he gets some more wins at middleweight. To me, I was strongly factoring in that he's beaten these guys like Ankalaev and Hill, just because I felt like the overall resume was better than Roman Dolitze's overall resume. So I felt like I had to put him in front of him. But if you don't want to do that, totally fine. I get it. Rank him, 10 or 11 or whatever it is. But he's got to be in the fucking rankings if you have Andre Muniz in the rankings.
I agree.
Yeah. Did we match up Muniz?
We did not.
Do it.
I actually did not even think about one for him. Ooh, but I have one, I believe. I don't know if he has a fight. But Muniz hasn't looked great in a couple fights. I mean, he hasn't looked awful either. But even his win over Uriah Hall, I wasn't thrilled about. So I think he's due for a little step back. I will throw out Gerald Meerschaert and hope that they grapple.
Okay, Omar, any other ideas for what's next for him? Great fight.
I would like to use Andre Muniz at this point as a stepping stone for somebody, for Mr. Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. I think that's a great fight. I think it's a good fight for Fluffy to work up his way up. And I think he recently won, right? So like time frame wise, this should work out. So he should be ready.
We actually both just used booked guys. Unfortunately, we suck. Anthony Hernandez fights Chris Curtis in September. And Gerald Meerschaert fights Andre Petrosky in August.
All right. Trash.
So, hey, I'll adjust mine to the winner of Meerschaert and Petrosky. I think that works either way.
For sure.
Yeah. I guess I'll probably go with the winner then for Fluffy and who's the other one?
Chris Curtis.
Chris Curtis. Poor Chris Curtis. I think he's going to lose that fight too. Jesus.
Yeah.
But yes, Mike.
Shall we move on? Okay. Let us do it. Let's move on. In the lightweight division, Farez Ziam defeats Jai Herbert by UD 30-27, 29-28, and 29-28. Omar, start us off this time. Give us your take on Ziam getting it done.
Yeah, I mean, Ziam looked good, man. I definitely had Ziam winning 3 rounds. I felt bad for Jai Herbert because it didn't really seem like he ever really got Ziam's number or got comfortable in there. I think Jai Herbert trying to make his striking work. I think Ziam was just a little bit a step ahead of him. He was able to counter, I think, a little bit better as well. And as much center control as Herbert got in that fight, it just seemed like Ziam was the one getting more off and pressing forward. So I had him winning all 3 rounds, but I did think it was a competitive fight.
Mark?
Yeah, I think the judges got this one right as well. I don't even really see what the controversy could have been, and I know there was some on Twitter and all that. Oh. Sure, it was a good competitive fight, but to me, Farez Ziam clearly took rounds 1 and 2. So regardless of how you want to score round 3, it's irrelevant. But I actually thought he won all 3 rounds of the fight also. Sure, Jai had a lot of clinch work, but not much was done there, and in space, Ziam's counter lead left was making the difference all fight long. Herbert ate that 100 times. And, Herbert was struggling, to go back to that for 1 second. He was struggling, I thought, with anytime he stepped in, Ziam was in orthodox stance. So his lead hand, he was just using it as like a lightning quick counter hook. And Herbert couldn't do his own damage because he was getting clipped by that repeatedly, and he didn't adjust to it all fight long. So I felt like that was his biggest issue, and I felt like Ziam was the better man here. Landed the cleaner shots, earned the decision.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Want to match up Ziam real quick? We'll keep rolling here.
Sure. I'll say I'm not entirely sure what Nasrat Hakparast is up to. He hasn't been booked in a while, but I think that's kind of the right type of next step for Ziam, and it would be fun to see those two striking in there. So I'll throw him out.
Yeah, man. All right. Any other ideas?
Mine, I believe. Now I should have I'm an idiot. I should have wrote down the first name because there's two of them. But I believe Ismail Bonfim is the one that I had.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. For Ziam. That would be my pick.
Okay. Anything you guys want to say about Mr. Jai Herbert? Or you want to move on?
I have one for him if you want me to.
Yeah, do it.
It's been tough for Jai Herbert, and he's been really close to breaking through. I feel like he clearly does have talent. He hurt Tybura in that fight. He had the draw with Ludovic Klein that was tough. This one was close. He just couldn't pull it out. So he's not bad. I know his record is now 2-4-1, I believe, in the UFC. I think that's accurate. But I'd like him to get another chance to look exciting. I know Lando Venata is getting in there soon against Mike Breeden. Assuming he wins that fight, which he should, I think Lando and Herbert would be a fun one.
That is a fun one.
Yeah, man.
I had Jai Herbert versus Jordan Leavitt. Jordan Leavitt, I think, recently had to pull out of a fight for whatever reason. Timeline-wise, I think now that Jai just finished fighting, I think that should be able to line up pretty well.
Nice. All right, moving on. We've got a lot to cover. In the featherweight division, Lerone Murphy defeated Joshua Culibao by UD. Pretty decisive in this one. 30-26 on 2 scorecards and a 30-27. Mark, start us off this time. Give us your take of another W for the English in this featherweight bout.
Lerone Murphy is just a really solid fighter, man. Like he's that type of fighter that coaches must love. It's like he does everything to a T, the way you teach it. Like he checks all the boxes. He's just clean. And he's not an incredibly dynamic finisher, though he does have 2 in his 6 UFC fights. And he does sometimes end up in fights that are maybe closer than they should be. But there are a lot of skills in that toolbox that Lerone Murphy brings to the table. So the potential is still in there, I would say, for him to really take another step forward. And Culibao was in this throughout. He's no easy fight. He cracked Lerone a few times, but Lerone was a bit faster. The reaction time was noticeably quicker. And he had the wrestling and the grappling to turn to when he wanted to. And as game as Culibao was, he couldn't overcome all that. So another nice statement for Lerone Murphy to handle Culibao the way that he did. And he's another one where it's time to give this man a ranked fighter. He's undefeated, and he deserves it. I feel like him and Nathaniel Wood are like identical rises at this point. They're both right there where it's like 2 up-and-coming featherweights, time to give them their shot to see if they can break through.
Yeah, man.
Omar?
You said Nathaniel Wood?
We weren't matching them up. I just said that they're in similar places. I was just going through the fight. I wouldn't match them up. I want them both to fight a ranked fighter. I don't want them to fight each other. Granted, it would be for like the King of England, but
I kind of want them to fight each other. That's kind of where I'm at. It was a good fight, though, man. It's really nice to watch Lerone Murphy fight. He's very, very technical. He's very good. His cardio seems ridiculous. Like, his ability to keep going and even turn it up in the 3rd round, I think, is absolutely crazy. And poor Josh Culibao just got completely fucking run over. And in the 3rd round, it got so much worse. That 10-8 in the 3rd round I thought was pretty warranted. And it was a beautiful performance from Lerone Murphy? Lerone Murphy. I'm really interested to see where this stops, right? His ability to just run through people. I'm really curious to see where it stops and he runs into some real, somebody who's really going to put it on him, because the way he's fighting right now, it's very difficult to see him not running into or running into an issue somewhere outside of the top 10. He's very, very good.
Yeah, man. He is, for sure. All right, let's keep going.
Wait, can we match them up?
Oh, yeah, please do. Sorry.
I will go with Alex Caceres. It's a name that Lerone Murphy mentioned, and I like that fight, so I will agree.
Omar?
Yeah, I already said I wanted the Murphy versus Nathaniel Wood. It's very possible it doesn't make any sense, but it's a fight I want to see.
Anything you guys want to say about Culibao, or you want to go on to Marcos?
I'll throw him another tough fight, unfortunately. I think he would be a good next step for Pat Sabatini.
Okay.
For
Omar?
Culibao?
Yeah.
So I had either Sung Woo Choi or Duho Choi. Either one I think would be fun fights.
Absolutely. Okay, in the bantamweight division, opening up the main card of this UFC Fight Night, Daniel Marcos defeated Davey Grant by a split decision. I was disappointed in this one. The scorecards read 29-28 on two of these scorecards for Marcos, and Davey Grant earning his own 29-28. Omar, start us off. Give us your take, and who did you think won the fight, and your take on the fight overall?
It's a weird fight, man, because I had Davey Grant winning 3 rounds. So, much to my surprise, by the end of this fight, we were trying to figure out who had won 2 out of the 3 rounds. I didn't really understand it too much. I guess looking back at it, there wasn't a ton happening in that fight. There was a lot of activity coming from Davey Grant, which I think is what swayed me a lot in most of those rounds. A lot of the forward pressure, a lot of the things that were being thrown were thrown by Davey Grant. It's just a lot of things weren't landing, and I think this was happening from both sides. If there was one thing that was working to Davey Grant's disadvantage, it was all the damage that had already been done to his face, the visible damage that had been done to his face, which, to be fair, could have happened from 1 or 2 punches. It's not like he was getting beat on consistently, but the man's nose was like leaking blood, and it was like all over him. And it wasn't a great look. I'm just not really sure where we can really say Daniel Marcos won 2 out of the 3 of those rounds. I'm hard pressed to yell like robbery, because I think both guys frankly could have done more throughout that entire fight, but not my favorite decision. I can say that.
Yeah, Mark?
Took pretty much all the words out of my mouth. I can't say it much better than that. I did think round 1 was really close. Like, if you wanted to say 10-10, I wouldn't hate you for it. You asked me to pick who won round 1. I am saying Davey Grant. And then I thought he won round 2. And I thought he won round 3.
Oh, all right.
So I agree with Omar. They did both have trouble finding their range. They both had trouble landing cleanly to the head. Maybe that's what made the scoring a bit weird. But one guy, Davey Grant, was pushing the pace. One guy, Davey Grant, was landing way more strikes. And the other guy, Daniel Marcos, was just not landing all that much. So I don't see how you're giving him 2 of these rounds. I think this fight should have gone Davey Grant's way. I think that decision's got to be pretty tough for him to swallow, because I think he thought he was winning the whole fight, and I'm not really a fan of it either.
That being said, moving right along here, let's just match up both of these guys since it was a close fight. Mark, give us both of your names for these guys right off the bat.
I mean, considering Davey Grant just beat Rafael Sunsao in his previous fight, Daniel Marcos has kind of risen up this division pretty quickly here. I'll say throw him across from the man ranked number 15 by the UFC, Chris Gutierrez.
Oh, wow.
And then for Davey, I'll go with a guy who actually recently lost to Rafael Sunsao, but I still think he's at a very similar standing to where Davey Grant is, and I think it would make for a great fight, which is Victor Henry.
Ooh, nice. Omar?
Dope. So I actually had Daniel Marcos fighting somebody like Cody Stamann. I guess I didn't really just want to push him all the way up there, but Cody Stamann was the one I had for him. And then Davey Grant, I was more interested to see him against Hani Barcelos. I thought that'd be a fun fight.
It would. All right, boys, let us now throw the remaining...
fighting Mike's boy, actually. Hani would have to get through that because he's fighting Kyler Phillips.
Phillips hasn't fought in a minute, right?
I only just saw that today. What'd you say?
When's the last time Kyler Phillips fought?
What did you say, Mike? A while ago.
It's been a
He had a
minute.
little suspension, and then
Yeah.
I think when he came back, he pulled out because he got hurt or something. So it's been like a lot of delays.
Yeah.
Oh.
He was suspended for a while, though. I think at least 6 months, if not longer.
But I didn't even know he was booked against Barcelos, and I randomly saw it today, and I was like, oh, fuck, that's a banger.
That is
Yeah, man. Hell yeah. All right, let us throw the remainder of these fights from this UFC Fight Night into our lightning round. So I challenge Omar, forget about picks. Give me your quickest lightning takes, a phrase or perhaps two, for the results of these remaining bouts. Let us start in the lightweight division. Joel Alvarez gets it done over Mark Jacasey by submission via Bravo choke. The official time, 4:26 of round 2. Omar, go first.
So I hate this finish to this fight. Mark Jacasey took a real big shot to the dome, to the jaw, or to the temple, actually, from a headbutt. Felt it, called it right away. Referee was like, if he dies, he dies. I didn't see it. Sorry. And just let Mark Jacasey get bullied for the remainder of that fight until he got caught in a choke that he couldn't get out of. I can only imagine he probably was still dazed and hearing ringing in his ears the entire time that was happening. And I really hated it. I really hate that there's no sort of backup system there, like that this is really, I didn't see it, so I can't do anything about it. Like, I think we've got to trust the fighters a little bit more. I think if people are gaming the systems, things like replays and things like that can set that in order. But I don't know, man. I didn't care for the way that ended, and I can't give any shit to Joel Alvarez. That's not really his problem. That was definitely something that the referee needed to get on top of. He didn't, and it cost Mark Jacasey the fight. I will add that up until that point, Mark Jacasey was getting handled. And I don't think that Mark Jacasey was going to win that fight, but the way he lost it was really, really sucky.
Mark?
Yeah, it was a good fight while it lasted with a shitty ending, unfortunately. We did get to see Mark Jacasey strike again, which was fun because we haven't seen that in a little bit. But here he had no interest in taking Joel down when they were still dry. So we had one round of striking, which was nice to see. Second round, he did take him down, did have some success in the wrestling, but Joel battles back up. They're exchanging, and then headbutt happens to the back of Mark Jacasey's head, which is not something you see every day. But the ref didn't see it any day. And as Omar said, Joel did nothing wrong. He took advantage. He finished the fight, but absolutely a shitty situation for Mark Jacasey.
Yeah. All right. Mahmoud Muradov, UD over Brian Barberena. Mark, keep going.
This one went how we imagined it would. Muradov just out-athleted him. He was bigger, longer, stronger, faster, can grapple. It was just too much for Barberena to overcome, as game as he is. And Barberena is going to struggle at middleweight if he decides to stay here, because I think that Brian Barberena pressure walk him down strategy is not as effective against longer guys who can snipe him, and that is absolutely what Muradov was doing all fight long. Dropped Barberena a few times. So we will see what he does going forward weight-wise, but this was definitely a needed bounce-back win for the Uzbek in Muradov. Well done by him.
Omar.
Yeah, I mean, if we're being completely honest, man, Barberena got outclassed. I mean, there was no point in this fight where Barberena really had a leg in this race. Muradov was bouncing around, jabbing him from the outside, beating on him, landing solid punches almost throughout the entire fight. Landed a lot of good punches. Even had a moment where Barberena turned around, kind of showed his ass a little bit, and Muradov was able to put two punches right together, drop Barberena. It wasn't a great performance from Brian Barberena that fight, unfortunately, but it was a good performance from Muradov. He really did work in that fight, and definitely a good showing from him.
Okay, Ketlin Vieira, UD over Pani Kianzad. Omar, staying with you.
Yeah, so the beginning of this fight, you thought this might be somewhat competitive. They were standing on the feet, kind of exchanging a little bit, testing each other or measuring each other, and it was a nice pace. And then Ketlin Vieira took it to the ground, and that's where it stayed. Kianzad had zero answer for the ground game, which I guess at this point is going to happen against people like Ketlin Vieira. But she had no answer for the ground game, no way to get back up, just completely stayed on the bottom for definitely for 2 rounds. I think even part of the first round, I can't really remember, but 100% for 2 and for 3. So it was a good showing for Vieira. She was dominant, not the most exciting, but definitely a dominant performance.
Mark?
Yeah, this one was pretty one-sided. Vieira knew she had an advantage, and she leaned on it, and rightfully so. You know, it wasn't the most exciting performance ever, but it was dominant in the grappling. It was a clear win for her, and frankly, she needed a performance like this. And Pani battled as much as she could. She was just, didn't really have what it took to get Vieira off her. And then late third round, she did finally turn it around, got on top, but it was just too little too late, and she was mostly outclassed. So good win for Ketlin.
Okay, just to keep this episode a little bit briefer, we're going to cut off our lightning round there, but of the 5 remaining bouts that we're not going to fully touch on from this UFC Fight Night, any other notable performances that you guys just want to quickly spotlight for our listeners to go back and watch?
I'll do one. But,
it's probably the same one. It's probably the same one. That the way they opened this card with Rafael Filo and Daniel Barretz, that fight is fucking crazy. Like, if you haven't seen that fight, you need to watch that fight. That fight was absolute madness. Filo was getting his ass handed to him, back and forth, getting cracked with big shots, getting dropped, getting back up. And somewhere along the line, and eating heavy body shots, by the way, like real nasty ass body shots, both in the kicking game and in the hands. I mean, shovel hooks for days. And then somewhere along the line, Filo had a burst of energy and started coming at Barretz and didn't stop and kept going and kept going. And somehow found Barretz on the ground. He ended up hitting him with a takedown and like anaconda'd his way up this man's body all the way to a arm triangle choke and finished the fight. When I tell you this is one of the greatest comebacks I've seen in a little bit, I mean, there was no way I thought that man was going to win that fight, let alone win the fight that way and that quickly from having recently just gotten his ass beat a little bit. So beautiful performance from Filo. Definitely one we have to shout out because it was a hell of a fight from both guys.
Mark?
Yeah, you're not wrong. I'm on the same fight. This was a crazy one. And Daniel Barretz looked good. I mean, as intriguing as you can look in a loss. Good footwork, fast, heavy-handed, strong kicks. There was a lot to like there. But Filio, to his credit, he found himself in a firefight and said, at a certain point it was going south, and then he was like, fuck it, let's bang. And it was him doing that forced Barretz to take his foot off the gas a little bit. And even when Filio started to, he was still throwing the much wider shots and not as clean as Barretz, but just the fact that he bit down and said, all right, fuck it, we'll exchange, made Barretz kind of take his foot off the gas, and it changed the fight. As soon as he did, the takedown came, arm triangle, tap, really slick work from Filio, and he gets his first UFC win. So, yeah, hell of a fight.
Yeah.
All right, boys.
I guess just for the sake of it, quickly, I'll give the props to just the rest of the results. Johnny Parsons, debuted with a TKO of Danny Roberts. Michael Parkin with a debut win, UD over Jamal Pogues. Chris Duncan had a battle with Yanal Ashmos, won that by UD. And Bruno Brazil wins a UD over Shauna Bannon. Felt like we couldn't just ignore them without at least saying their names when they got a UFC W.